This is the Dreame L10 Pro. For those of you that don't know, Dreame is part of the Xiaomi ecosystem and it's very Roborock-esque. So I kind of had a pretty good expectation of what I thought this might be based on the specs and stuff, but somehow it has actually managed to surprise me because it's got a few things that it actually outperforms all of the other ones in. The L10 Pro in the Dreame range is the mid to low end. It hasn't got an auto empty station, but it is still a smart navigating robot with good suction, and it did really well in all of our tests. It uses LiDAR to navigate, which is a little laser here underneath the dome, and it scans the room, looking around the room in 360 degrees, taking measurements. So it's super accurate, and it also has quick mapping, which means that instead of cleaning the whole house while creating the map, it just drives into each room, takes a scan, and then into the next, and so on and so on. It's very impressive, and it saves you a lot of time, particularly if you ever have to remap. As I said, this is meant to be a mid-range robot, but all of the specs are very premium except for the lack of auto empty station. It's very similar to the more higher mid-range Z10 Pro. I can't really see too many differences on the specs. It has 4,000 pascals of suction, which do really well. It has the LiDAR, it has the DTOF sensor on the front for extra object avoidance. This is particularly useful for items that are below the height of the LiDAR and that won't trigger the bump sensor. So it means that it gets stuck a lot less frequently on the things like cables or socks or shoelaces, just anything that's lying on the ground that you haven't picked up. It means that you can send it out to clean on a schedule without having to do as much room prep before each clean. It has a 150-minute runtime or a 5,200 milliamp hour battery, which is about the most you'll find on a robot vacuum. They claim that this can do up to about 250 square meters, but it will obviously have to recharge and resume at mid-clean to do that. You always take these numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt because they test them on minimum suction mode without the mop, and not really how you'd actually use it. So you generally want to take about 65% of what they would claim. If we take a look at the bottom, it has a standard bristled roller brush, which has a combination of bristles and silicone. This usually does really well at things like pet hair. I actually loaned this robot out to a friend that has a couple of ragdoll cats, and they've tried a number of other robots, all in a much higher price range than this, and none of them could actually cope with their home, whereas this one has. So that 4,000 pascals of suction is doing some real heavy lifting, but the brush, more importantly, picks up the hair and actually manages to transfer it from the brush into the dustbin. It also has cliff sensors, so it won't fall down any falls that could hurt it, so you don't need to worry about stairs or anything like that. It has a single side brush, which actually performed pretty well, even on things like seeds on hard floors. It wasn't flicking too much around, but it was just doing enough to get it into this main roller brush area. The two drive wheels are pretty much standard, as you'd expect, sprung loaded, and if it lifts itself up, it'll keep those drive wheels on the ground so that it won't get stuck. Because it doesn't have an auto empty station, the dustbin size is suddenly a lot more relevant, and it is 575 mils, which is actually pretty good. Definitely one of the bigger ones with a mop on board as well. The mop has a 270 mil water container, and the mop is a standard drag around mop. Now, one of the most annoying little things that you kind of want to keep in mind, there's a workaround for it, but it doesn't have carpet detection when the mop is on. So if you've got the mop attached, it may wet your carpet and drag it around on the carpet. However, once you've got that map, you can go into the app and you can set up no mop zones. So the robot will recognize that the mop is attached and it won't go within that zone on the map while it's attached. So there's a workaround, but it is worth noting because it makes it just a little bit more frustrating, and you do need the app if you want to use the mop properly. Definitely still more of a maintenance tool, but it did all right. As you'll see, we've got a new cleaning area to test the robots, so it's quite a lot harder than our previous smaller one. It still did really well. You'll see that the side brush tends to flick things away a little bit more because there's more room and there's objects for it to hide behind. It got 19 of the 20 grams of seeds on hard floors after 2 passes, which is our standard test, so that's still very impressive. It only got 33 of the 40 grams of Fruit Loops, but I think that was actually largely down to the fact that the Fruit Loops are clumping around the legs of the table and things like that. But it's still very impressive because I think that the test area is now a lot harder. On the mopping, we used a sticky coffee syrup and we also used some grape juice. It did pretty well on the coffee. It actually got all of it pretty easily, which should actually be the harder part of the test. It did leave a slight red hue to the floor on the red grape juice. So the robot did pretty well on the mopping. It is still a drag around mop. It doesn't look like it puts quite as much water on the mopping pads as what I would like, but it still actually did get rid of all of the coffee, and it left just a slight little red residue from the grape juice. To try and clean up the last of this just little red residue here, we're just going to spray it with a bit of multi-purpose cleaner and see if that does the trick.
Start zone cleaning.
We did get rid of that with a third pass by spraying some multi-purpose cleaner on the floor before it did it. On the carpet, it did well on the seeds, as I would expect, but the Fruit Loops are a particularly challenging thing, and we may have to revise this test in future because we've only tried this and the Z10 Pro and they've both kind of struggled with it so far. It's not so much down to the suction power, it's more just, there's a number of factors actually. It's partly the object avoidance, it starts to avoid the Fruit Loops, and then it also struggles to get it in because it's bumping up and over and the Fruit Loops get stuck into the carpet, and it looks more like a four-wheel driving challenge than a cleaning challenge. It did actually end up getting most of them, but there were still a few around. Maybe with a couple more passes it would have got them all because it wasn't struggling to get them up, it was just kind of avoiding them and yeah, just exploring. So we've just done the hair test on the carpet and we've put quite a lot of hair from the wig down, and as you can see it did exceptionally well. As did the other Dreame models that we've tested. I was shocked at how well the Z10 Pro did on the hair test. So let's turn this over and see if it has done just as well. No. So as you can see, there is a lot more hair tangled around the brush this time. The Z10 Pro seemed to do really well at getting it all into the dustbin, whereas in this case, a lot of it is tangled around the brush. If we take a look inside the dustbin, we'll see how much actually did make it. So I'd say probably 50 or 60% actually made it into the dustbin, whereas about half of it is still tangled around the brush. So there's none on the ground, but you will have to detangle the brush if it's anything like this. On the object detection test, it did extremely well with the cables, definitely well above average. It didn't even touch it, but it was coming right up close and then nicely just going around it. So it did 10 out of 10 on that. It was a little bit hit or miss though with the poop, and you definitely want it to be more miss than hit. So can't guarantee that it would avoid dog poo. It may sometimes hit it, so you still want to clean up after your pets. This is the Xiaomi app, and as you can see, it looks fairly familiar compared with the other apps on the market. Because the robot's off the base at the moment, you have the option to send it back to dock, or we can start a clean. At the moment, it's set to clean the whole area all at once. If I go into room, I can select specific rooms and click clean, and it will just go and clean those specific rooms. Otherwise, I can select zone and just surround a specific area, and it will go and clean that up. That was particularly useful while we were filming our cleaning tests. We can also go and add no-go zones. A no-go zone is where the robot won't clean over that line and it will stay out of that area. We also have the no mop zones here, which is exactly the same concept as a no-go zone, but it only applies when the mop is attached. So when the mop is attached, it won't go into that purple zone, but as soon as I unclip it, it'll just act as if it's not there. You can also add invisible virtual walls, which are particularly useful for along glass, ranch sliders, or places like that where the robot can't actually see it and it will stop it from rediscovering it every single clean. In the cleaning settings here, you'll see that we have the option to change the cleaning mode. So at the moment it's set to vacuum and mop, but you can do a vacuum only or a mopping only. In the suction settings, we have 4 different options from quiet up to turbo. And obviously on turbo mode, it's a lot louder, but it will do a much deeper clean. We also have the water flow rate. Like I said, there's a little pump inside the mop, so you can change that. So on high, it's better for deeper, more stubborn stains, whereas on light, it's just gonna do a little maintenance sweep. You can also set how often it will cover each area during that cycle. So you can go up to 3 times, so it will do each area 3 times before it returns to base. You can also set up cleaning sequences where you can choose which order you want the room to be cleaned in. You also have the option to do customized cleaning, which means that you can set specific suction levels or any of these settings on a room by room basis that it will obey even on schedules. In the map management section, we have the option to add additional rooms. So this is useful if you've got multi-level houses. It can save additional floor plans that you can add no-go zones to for each level. The robot is smart enough to recognize if you carry it up the stairs and load the correct floor plan. Up in the main settings section in the top right here, we have a whole horde of other settings. You can turn off the object avoidance, which can be useful if you find that it's avoiding things you don't want it to do. At the moment, we've got the carpet boost turned off so that when it goes onto carpet, it doesn't automatically raise its suction level, but that can be a useful feature, particularly if you're trying to get the most out of the battery top life. Resume cleaning is when it runs out of charge during a clean. It will return, it'll charge itself up, and then it will continue to finish the job. Do not disturb mode is slightly more useful than what you may first imagine. We've got it set to start at 10 PM and end at 8 AM. It just means that during that time frame, the robot won't auto-empty itself and it won't start a new cleaning cycle or resume cleaning. We also have the option to set a schedule. It's pretty much just like setting an alarm on your phone. You select where you want to clean, then you select a starting time, and then which days you want to repeat it, if ever. You can obviously see the cleaning history. If we go in here, it'll probably look a bit funny after we've done all of our little tests. In the past, you'll see that you can got nice straight lines right down the middle, and it goes right around the edge of the room first and essentially just colors in the rest of the area. So you can see where it's been, and it knows if it's missed any spots, so it shouldn't miss them ever, really. There are a whole heap of other settings, but I think I've covered all of the most useful ones, and overall it's pretty intuitive and fully functioning. Overall, I think I went into this robot expecting to know exactly what I was going to get. However, it did much better in the vacuuming tests than what I expected. In its price range, I have no real doubt that it's the best that I've tried. It has 4,000 pascals of suction, which meant that it was doing a real deep clean, and it actually looked like a deep clean. But it was also the only one that I've tested in that friend's house that I mentioned that was able to cope with that level of cat hair. The navigation and object avoidance is, again, exceptional in its price range. It's as good as you're really going to get until you go to those S7 Max V Ultra sort of price range models. The mopping is still a little bit average, and it doesn't have no mop zones. It's kind of handy to have, but think of it more as dusting the floor or removing those fresh spills. It's not going to get anything stubborn. So if you're looking for a robot vacuum and you're more interested in the vacuuming performance than the mopping, and this is your budget, then I would absolutely buy this. None of the other robot vacuums in this price range really have a good mop either. You have to spend a little bit more and go up to like a Roborock S7 or something like that. So this would definitely be my first choice in the price range because the vacuuming performance and navigation is excellent. Make sure to watch this video to see how it compares to a similar robot in its price range. Otherwise, ask any questions in the comments below, or like the video and subscribe as we've got other Dreame reviews coming shortly.